question number 4.
Well, let's just, we don't have to go in order. Those are just suggested questions. So I think I had put a question out there this week. I can't remember what I put in there. What was the question that you had?
I don't remember. I got to go look at
Because
that.
one was, what was your relationship with your mom? But you had touched on that last time. I know she wasn't around. You had talked about that.
Yeah, one was with what favorite toy did I have?
And that was the one you answered last week.
Right.
And I
Now,
think
do you have the questions that I sent you and Mom that time that y'all never answered?
I think I have them. I have to find them. That they're back in the bedroom somewhere. But I think I answered most of those. Did I ever give you that thing I did when I was doing white coat jacket for the fraternity?
Me?
Yeah.
And you never gave me the answers to those questions either. And I couldn't find them because I think maybe I sent them from my work email because I couldn't find them in my Gmail account.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to go back and see. I got something that says log into your story. I know that's not it. Andre, did you write that email address down?
sbutchb at Gmail.
Gmail, that's where you're gonna start sending everything. Well, you can send it to both. You can send it to both.
Okay, I don't know if I have
and you can send it to Sterling.Broadus at Verizon.net.
okay.
Okay, where? There you go. What happened to, okay, I see that one.
Which one did you use today, Dad? How did you log in? Which email did you use?
sbutchb at gmail.com. That's the one on, that one is on the Chromebook.
Oh, okay.
And the other one is Sterling.Broadus at Verizon.net. That's on the desktop and the cell phone.
Okay.
Hey, well, I don't know what happened to all those questions. I saw them a few minutes ago. All right, well, anyway, what's, oh, here's one. Who had the most positive influence on you as a child?
Sure.
That's today, right?
Yes.
Okay, we can go with that. I had a lot. If you're talking about as a child, the first one I remember was a man named Reverend Roundtree. And Reverend Roundtree collected the trash when we were living in suburban garden apartments on Sheriff Road. And I used to go with him. And back then, each apartment building, each apartment on Sheriff Road in suburban gardens apartments, each apartment had a hole in the ground with a container in the hole and a top. And what you would do is all the garbage and stuff in your house, trash and stuff, you would take it out there and put it in this container in the hole. And Reverend Roundtree would collect it, take it to the incinerator and dump it in the hole and burn it up.
Wow. Okay.
And I started hanging out with him when he was collecting that trash, you know, on days that I could. Because I can't remember the days, but I think it was maybe one day a week. And it was a weekday. It seems like it was a weekday, right? That was one of my first experiences not doing something right, because I was standing up there and I had my reading book from from Burfield Elementary School. And I don't know what I did, but my book fell into the incinerator and burned up. So I didn't know how I was going to explain it. Either way I was going to explain it, I was going to get beat. So I went home and nobody knew anything about it but me. And I got lucky because when it was time to collect the books, the teacher's name was Miss Waves. I think we were in the 3rd grade. She asked me to collect the books. She was always asking me to do stuff, right? So I collected all the books and put them in the back. She said, "All the books there?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." But I knew mine wasn't there. Mine had burned up in the fire, right? So I had gotten out of that little thing, but that was that was a big old lie I told, but I got away with it. And Reverend Roundtree, he didn't know that the book fell in the fire, but he used to always talk to me about how important it was to go to school and to learn. Go to school, learn. That was Reverend Roundtree. I don't even know if he was a minister. I just knew we called him Reverend Roundtree. And he was a positive influence on me because I remember so clearly being with him, right? And something else going back, when we used to play in our apartment building on Sheriff Road, on the corner of the building, there was a little ledge. It was like brick added to the building that you could climb up the building on. You put your hands on one edge and climb up and climb. And we used to climb up on that thing and get up on the top of the apartment building and look all over the place. And there would always be something up there. And we also used to go up there when our ball on the playing field, when they hit the ball on top of that building, we climb up that edge. Now, I can't tell you how high it is, but I mean, it's still there. You can ride up Sheriff Road now and see the building. But we used to go up there a lot and just sit up there, talking and playing around up on the roof. Then, when we didn't want to do that, under the building, there was a storage unit, a storage area. All the apartment buildings had a storage area under there with a wire door and lock and everything. Of course, nobody ever locked anything. But we would get under there, and from that area there was a little doorway that you could go under the building. It's sort of like my crawl space. And we used to go underneath over there and hang out, crawling around in that dirt. Be rats and stuff in there, you know, but we would crawl around in that dirt under there. But we liked it because it was so secluded and nobody knew we were under there, right? And we spent a lot of time hanging around under there. But mostly it was like I was telling you before, we just hung out in the woods and over there playing ball and basketball and stuff like that. But people who influenced me when I was young, and I've had people influencing me almost until I finished college. I had, after Reverend Roundtree, I had a teacher at Woodson Junior High School. He was assistant principal. And he took an interest in me. And he told me I could be anything I wanted to be if I would just listen and pay attention. And what he did was he got me to come over to his house and clean his bathroom, kitchen, and stuff like that when I was in junior high school. And he would pay me. But he was pretty good because he always encouraged me, just like the rest of them, you know, school is important. School is important, you know, stop clowning around, getting into trouble. And plus he had a side business where he sold caskets to funeral homes. And he took me through all of that, right? He showed me, took one time and showed me all these caskets and things that he was selling. And he sort of explained what it was all about, but I didn't pay it. I wasn't really interested in that. But he did explain all of it to me. And he would look out for me when I was in school. If I got into something, you know, I would be hoping that they'd send me to him, because he would give me a break, right? And when I got to Spingarn, I had a biology teacher, Mr. Saunders. He was really, in fact, later on, Mr. Saunders' daughter ended up working with Teresa in the telephone company. And I told her one time, I know your dad, right? She said, you know my father? I said, yeah, he taught me biology at Spingarn. He was another one that used to always tell me, he would have just always told me, you can do better than you're doing. All you got to do is settle down. You can do better all the time. Sterling, you can do better. You're just not trying. You're not doing your best. You know, in other words, I was just getting by. Do whatever you got to do to get by. And he was good, Mr. Saunders, but that didn't last long, because as soon as I turned 16, I dropped out of Spingarn. And that's when I got over there with Earlene and Dimps and Alfred and Lloyd and Dimples. That's where I hooked up over there. And I guess the next influence was probably Sam and Gwen. Because when I went to live with them, that I think was probably the turning point in my life, because I had not experienced what I experienced with them. I hadn't lived like that before. They were good, but it was the environment. The people who came to visit them were doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, right? They were all credentialed people. And the conversations that they would have, I had no idea what they were talking about most of the time. And then I finally started paying attention to the things they were talking about, because see, at that time, some of them used to work for FDA. And they talk a lot about chemistry and formulas and stuff like that, you know, which I had no idea what to talk with them. They would make jokes and they would all fall out laughing. And I said to myself, what are they laughing about? Because I didn't understand what they were, the joke. So one of them, give you an example, one of them wrote on a piece of paper, HI-HO-AG. And then he asked the rest of them, what is this, right? Well, they knew the symbol, see, but because they knew the periodic table and they knew what HI stood for and blah, blah. And it turned out it was high-ho silver. And you know that the symbol for silver is AG. So HO, hydrogen oxide and blah, blah. But they just laughed at that. They thought that was so funny, but I didn't get it until I started studying chemistry when we got to St. Louis. And I said to myself, that's when the joke hit me. Because that was about 2 or 3 years later, right? I said, oh, that's what that joke was all about. And they had another one that they did that I never figured that one out, but they would draw something that looked like a chicken wire fence. You know, the octagonal little line, like a chicken wire fence. And then they put this chemistry formula on it. And it turned out, they told me it was called a dihydroxy chicken wire fence. Well, that never made sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me now, but they just fell out. They just laughed. It was so funny. But I was not used to that kind of humor. That I didn't know what they were talking about. That wasn't funny to me, right? And then I remember one, Julius Hobson lived across the street from us. And y'all may not know Julius Hobson, but he was a civil rights leader back in the 60s, right? And he was responsible for a lot of change in DC, especially in the school system, because he was always getting on the school, the mayor and everybody about spending more money west of the park than they were spending east of the park. And he was influential in getting them to change that and start spending more money. In fact, when I was at Deal, he helped get this program going where they would go to Bancroft and some other schools in Mount Pleasant and send buses up there to get those kids from east of the park and take them to go to Deal. And that was a big achievement for him, but he was always in the newspaper and everything. Well, I used to babysit for him because he lived directly across the street. And I used to babysit for him, and he had some dry, witty kind of humor. But I remember one time he came over to the house, and he and Sam were talking and playing around. And he told Sam, I'm gonna tear your house up. For some reason, told him, man, you mess with me, I'll tear your house up. So he picked this little stool up and set it upside down, right? And they just laughed. And I said to myself, what's funny about that? You call that tearing up a house? But they thought it was so funny, right? And they had a friend, this guy really got me started in knowing that you can do stuff with your hands. It was Mabel and Henry Dickerson. And we went over to their house once because they were family friends, and they took me over there. And Henry took me downstairs, and he had this machine called a shopsmith. He had used that shopsmith to build his bedroom furniture, all of it. And he told me, he said, I could teach you how to use this machine, and you could learn how to build things for yourself, right? But Henry passed before we got around to that. But just the idea, when I looked at Henry, and I said, damn, he built all that bedroom furniture with that machine over there, and I can do that. He can teach me how to do that, right? It's just unfortunate that I never got around to it, but he let me know that you can do things for yourself. You don't have to always go to the store and buy something. You can make it if you just take your time, right? So that was another, so that's what I mean by there were different things that influenced me all along the way. Not so much in St. Louis. When I got to St. Louis, they still had the same kind of company. You know, they were dentists and lawyers and stuff like that, you know. But I didn't interact with them that much because I was always with the girls and the guys out there because we formed a little club and I was always with them. But that, in terms of early influences, those were the ones. And I did have, when I was hanging out on Sheriff Road, I did have some parents of the guys that I was the guys and the girls that I was hanging out with. They were always telling me that I could do better. You know, like stop cutting school and hanging out with the wrong people and stuff like that. They were always telling me that because I did a whole lot of school cutting. I wasn't going to no school. That was that. And when I turned 16, because see, back there, when you turned 16, you could drop out of school. And you didn't have to worry about the truant officers. Because before that, the truant officers saw you on the street, they would pick you up and they would take you back to school or take you home, right? So once I became 16, I didn't have to worry about that anymore because I could just drop out, which I did, you know. Just being dumb, not, I don't know when I really got serious about education. I think it was probably when I got to St. Louis. I did pretty good at McKinley because McKinley had a different crowd than they had at Spingarn. McKinley's people seemed to be a little more upper class because they were up there second in T Northwest versus Spingarn and Northeast and stuff like that. But I had a couple of teachers up there at the McKinley. They were pretty good in trying to encourage me to stay in school. And the only reason why I got to McKinley was because I was living with Sam and Gwen. So I was no longer in Spingarn's zone. So to go back to school, I had to go to McKinley because we were living up there off of Rhode Island Avenue. Rhode Island and South Dakota. And the things were different because that's where I met Charlie Payne. And Charlie Payne and I were at McKinley together, right? And Charlie Payne lived off of Rhode Island Avenue with his family. So I was hanging out with a different bunch of people, different bunches of guys and girls and stuff like that. Not so much about girls when I got to McKinley. It was mostly hanging out with the guys, you know, but I had teachers up there who were really good. You know, I always took a lot of shop classes. And I don't know why I always ended up in these shop classes, but it turned out to be a benefit. It was my benefit because I took, well, when I was in junior high school, at Brown Junior High School, that's a whole nother story there. I took electricity shop and I took print shop. So I learned how to do printing on a printing press. Well, we had this thing they call a piker, and you had to learn the California job case, which had all the letters in these little compartments. And you would take those letters and put them in this piker. And then once you got your piker right and you tightened it up, you run it ink over it. And then you could print what you put in that piker on paper. They had a printing machine for that, right? So I learned that. Then I learned electricity, how electricity works, circuits, and how to wire bells and whistles and all that stuff, right? And then when I failed the 9th grade at Brown because I wouldn't go to school, well, I didn't do anything in school. When I went back, I went to Woodson Junior High School to repeat the 9th grade. And at Woodson Junior High School, I took wood shop and sheet metal shop. So wood shop, we learned how to make all of these things out of wood, how to carve things out of the wood and then take wood burners and put designs in the wood, you know. So really you're making things like people would find in their kitchen. We would do a fish and then we would have to burn the scales and outline the tail. So we learned a lot about woodworking. And we had a wood lathe. Wood lathe we used to make tools, like, you know, wood. They still use wood lathes today. You see them with that little thing in their hand going down the wood, shaving the wood in the shapes and stuff. Well, we learned how to do that. In sheet metal shop, we learned how to make cookie cutters. Well, we had to fold the metal, solder it together, and then take up what they call a ball peen hammer and just beat on it to make a design in the metal. So I learned all of that stuff, right? And when I got to McKinley, and 1 year I was up there, I took a machine shop. And machine shop You learn how to make tools. We made screwdrivers. We learned how to make hammers. We learned how to do it because instead of a wood lathe, we had a metal lathe. And you do the same thing with the metal that you would do with the wood. So I learned a lot about working machines and doing stuff with metal. So all of that sort of helped. It helps me now because there are things that I can do for myself now, even though the codes are different now. Some of that stuff I learned you can't do now. But those teachers, they were pretty good. I didn't have many problems at McKinley, and no problems when I got to St. Louis, because St. Louis sort of overwhelmed me. When I went to St. Louis and went to high school up there, and I was in 11th, I did the 11th and 12th grade there. And in the 11th grade, I had this teacher. She was a funny looking little teacher, but she was smart. She was a math teacher. And she gave us this problem to do. And I was the only one that came back with an answer that wasn't gotten the way everybody else did it. And she went over this thing and she finally said, well, good for you. Good for you, because you solved it the long way, not the short way. You solved it the long way. So you probably learned a lot about math because of the way you solved that problem, right? And I remember her just as clear. She was pretty nice influence on me because she was encouraging, telling you, yeah, you can do. It was always you can do. It was just most of the time I didn't listen. But when I got to St. Louis, McKinley and St. Louis, I started listening. And I started listening because of the influence Sam and Gwen and their families had, and their friends and family had. And then having Miss Johnson, she was secretary to the dean at DC Teachers College. That was her job. So it was all, I was cast into a environmental education thing where education was important versus where I was with Earlene and Dimps and Alfred. And then when I first dropped out of Spangdahl, there was no emphasis over there on going to school and getting educated. The emphasis there was just do whatever you want to do, You're not going to school. So, I used to clean their house every day. They would go to work and Dimps and them would go to school. And when they came home, the house would be clean. I used to clean their little house. Same thing when I was with Sam and Gwen. They had a maid, housekeeper named Fosie. And Fosie was a master cleaner. And I used to watch her clean. And I learned from Fosie how to clean, how to iron clothes, because she used to have to iron their clothes and clean up and everything, right? And I would always be watching Fosie, how to iron a shirt, how to iron slacks and stuff like that. And she always had a cigarette hanging out her mouth, right? The whole time she was working, she was smoking these cigarettes, right? But she was an excellent worker. And I decided to Sam, at that time, they had a pool table in the basement. And the basement wasn't all of that. So we went down, and Sam and I used to do a lot of stuff together. We went down and tiled the basement floor. Well, back then they had asphalt tile, the little 6x6 tiles, beige and dark brown. So we put that down in a checkerboard design. I was so proud of that floor that they never came down there and saw that floor dirty. I would clean, wax, and polish that floor, kept it shining. Shining so you could shine a light across it, right? Mm-hmm. And all the guys used to come over there to shoot pool. And as soon as they left, I cleaned that floor up. I cleaned everything up. I kept that basement just sparkling, right? But those were some of the things that helped me change because I had positive direction then. I had living with them and seeing how they lived was so different. Now, I'll tell you what was interesting. Gwen would buy me cigarettes and Sam would let me drink with him, right? Because Sam didn't smoke and Gwen didn't drink. So I was in between both of them. One would buy me cigarettes and the other one would let me drink, right? So, of course, and then, you know, dumb me, I did both of them. You know? But that was, I guess that was a negative influence, but they made it, Sam used to make everything seem like fun. His whole thing was just joking and having fun. That's what he liked to do. But the negative with him was he was really irresponsible, you know. He didn't help Gwen raising Bobby and Lynn because he was out busy running the streets, you know, doing whatever he wanted to do and spending up all the money because he could spend some money and Gwen would always be trying to budget. She taught me how to budget. She taught me how to get an envelope. She used to have envelopes for every bill. And then she would put checks in those envelopes. Then when it was time of the month to pay those bills, she'd have them all lined up in her little envelopes, right? And then she would subtract and do all of that. So I tried doing that when Teresa and I got married. It didn't work that well with me. It worked fine with her, but it didn't work well with me. Because I was more like Sam. I was going to spend the money what I was going to get what I wanted, right? And it was fortunate that we could cover most of the costs, but I did learn budgeting from Gwen. And from Sam, I learned that sense of humor thing, that let's drink and have fun, that kind of thing. So I don't know if that was a positive or a negative. Right now, I think it was a negative, but it was an influence just the same, right? So, all right, that's enough for today, right?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes, it is. Well, that's good. I
But
mean,
you didn't talk about the positive influence of them moving you to St. Louis. You didn't think that was a positive influence?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because when I went there, well, it was sort of, it started with McKinley.
Mm-hmm.
Carried over in St. Louis because I ended up basically the same type of students in the school. The difference was in St. Louis, the Blacks were like pepper in a salt shaker. It wasn't many of us, right? It was a must. You know, we just barely knew each other. We played sports and everything like that, but there weren't many Blacks in the school. And the school was newly integrated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a whole bunch of white folks. And I didn't understand them. You know, they were smart. No question about it. And I couldn't understand how they knew so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know anything, right? It's like we raised in different schools or something, right? But those kids were so smart, those white kids. And the classes that we took, like the one I told you all about, the one called Radio English, where they had this classroom set up like a radio studio. And they broke the class up into groups. It was 4 groups. And each group had their time on air. The thing even had an on air sign with all this controlled big window that we would sit behind. And we would actually produce a program and then add a program to the rest of the class. Well, they had them like that in DC. I didn't see nothing like that, right? It was different. It was a good experience out there, but
Were they prejudiced? Did they treat you bad? The other
no,
the white kids?
no. I had so many little white girls after me. No, because I think that was one of the things white folks were scared of. They didn't want us around because they knew that those girls were going to come after us, right? Especially if we were playing ball or they were country out there. So coming from DC was like, here comes the city slicker. You know, he know how to dance. He know how to talk to the girls. He knows how to do all this. So them white girls were sending me notes all the time, right? And they knew they couldn't take me home because their parents wouldn't gonna have that. But as long as we were in school, yeah, no, they did not. We didn't feel like we weren't wanted.
Oh, okay.
I think we didn't feel like that because it wasn't enough of us to threaten.
Right.
You know, they seem to be real. Like if it's only several of you in the neighborhood, they will take care of you. They would work. But as soon as your numbers start growing, they're getting ready to either turn on you or get away from you, right? And you still see that, man, you see how neighborhoods change because when Teresa and I moved out here, there wasn't a whole lot of blacks on this street. In fact, I don't think it was but one. That was Harvey, lived around the corner. They had that Georgia grass. Wasn't no blacks on this street.
But it seemed like that they were more accepting of you in St. Louis than even there when y'all moved to Fort Washington.
Yeah, they were. But they were just country people out there. But they're nice. They were nice.